Hello and welcome back to the beach. This is a session all about strategic choice. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at one of the key mechanisms of determining which strategy is the best one for us. Now, before we can get into any type of strategic choice, we have to have an understanding of what our organization is all about. So we need to have performed our strategic analysis. We need to have performed our external analysis, our internal analysis, our stakeholder analysis, and then our gap analysis. So before we get into actually making the choice, you've got to think about JSW's SACI model, strategic analysis, choice and implementation. So we have to have performed our analysis first. So the external analysis will include things such as maybe a PESTEL analysis, maybe some sort of 5 forces analysis. With regard to our internal analysis, we're looking at internal resource audits to make sure that we understand exactly what we have in terms of resources. We have to understand exactly what we have in terms of competencies as well. The stakeholder analysis is usually done through a Mendeley matrix, and then the gap analysis will potentially lead through an Ansoff matrix to determine which direction we need to be taking. Is it an efficiency gain we need? Is it an expansion gain we need? Is it a diversification gain that we need? Okay, once we've done that, now we can start thinking about working out whether or not this analysis is going to be useful. We now need to start thinking about this from a planning perspective. And what happens is our old friends Johnson and Scholes, the Whittington isn't involved in this one, but our old friends Johnson and Scholes came together and they said, when you're looking at the suitability of any type of strategic choice, you need to assess it using 3 different criteria. And these 3 different criteria are absolutely essential. We are looking at the Scottish Football Association, SFA. And whenever you're looking at any type of strategic choice, always think about suitability, feasibility, acceptability. Now, we're going to look at these 3 things. We're going to take maybe a minute on each just to make sure you're happy with what these are. And that's really what this session's all about. So looking at suitability to start with. Suitability says, can we actually do this type of thing? Does it build on our strengths? Now, the type of strengths that we have will have to have been previously identified. So the type of strengths that we have may have been previously identified. And then we also need to understand what our previously stated objectives were. So the suitability here says, does it fit into my strategic objectives? Does it fit into my mission statement? So does it fit into my mission statement? So yeah, I'm afraid the mission statement comes back to haunt us once again. Now, there are various different models which will allow us to see whether or not we do have these types of strengths or not. There are various different models that will allow us to see whether or not it fits in with our stated objectives. You could use something such as the BCG, the Boston Consultancy Group model. You could also look at things such as the product life cycle model. You could look at various different other models to see if it fits into our bigger picture objectives. But the 2 models I do want to very briefly talk about is a SWOT analysis. Now, the SWOT analysis looks at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, this will normally be done within your strategic analysis stage. But this strategic analysis stage allows me to understand my own internal strengths and weaknesses in terms of assets and resources that I have available, including competencies. And it also looks at the external environment. And what this now allows me to do is it allows me to put together an understanding of what I'm good at myself and also what the external environment wants me to be good at. The 2 main models that we talk about here, which will allow me to do this, will be a PESTEL analysis and then also Porter's 5 forces. So even though we're using a PESTEL analysis and Porter's 5 forces within my strategic analysis stage, it still has an impact now on my suitability when it comes to the choice stage. Now, I did say there was 3 different steps we need to go through: suitability, feasibility, acceptability. So that's the suitability style of things sorted out. Next, we look at this from a feasibility perspective. From a feasibility, we need to look at whether or not we've got the resources available to actually carry out this type of strategy. And these type of resources can include things such as cash amounts. So you might end up doing a cash flow analysis. You might do a break-even point analysis. You also need to take into account non-financial resources, and non-financial resources could include some sort of resource deployment analysis, which will allow me to have a look at key competencies that we have and allow me to identify competencies that we don't have. And now I consider, can I potentially buy them in? So the feasibility is all about, can I do it? So feasibility is all about, can I do it? And then the third and last step that I'm looking at is acceptability. Now, the acceptability side of things, I'm thinking about this in terms of stakeholder groups. So from an acceptability perspective, I'm looking at my Mendeley matrix to say, do I really want to be doing this? Will it keep my key players, my key stakeholders, will it keep them happy? If it will keep them happy, then I'm potentially interested in it. And I need to have an analysis of all of my various different stakeholder groups and allow me to understand the risk and return profile that they will have. So I need to understand their risk appetite. Now, we have got 3 other sessions which looks at decision theory, which looks at minimax, maximax, maximin, all those types of issues. Those types of models can now be used here to determine whether or not the strategy I've come up with is going to be acceptable to these various different key players that I've identified within my Mendeley matrix. Now, hopefully that sort of made sense. Suitability, feasibility, acceptability, 3 key issues with regard to any type of new strategy. Absolutely essential to make sure I go through all those 3 steps before I decide to try and actually implement something. So this is the second stage, if you will, within the JSW rational model, my Saki model. So this is the choice issue. So these are the 3 sets of tests I have for choice of strategy. That brings me up to the end of this session. Thank you very much for your attention, boys and girls, and I'll see you all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed back on the beach very soon.